Hello and welcome to Portsmouth This Week. I'm your host, Conley Zani. This show is under the auspices of Rich Rayner, our Portsmouth Town Administrator. Together, Rich, myself, and the entire Portsmouth This Week team are on a mission to build community. We do that by bringing you accurate and timely information about the events and issues that impact you. And we introduce you to the faces, the personalities, the leaders in this magical place in which we live. I'm very honored today to have two guests. I have our municipal court judge, Richard DiDario.
Right.
Thank you for being here, Your Honor. And Todd
welcome.
Drake.
Hi,
now this is a mouthful, the Portsmouth District Wastewater Manager.
Wastewater.
Did I get that right? Close. Yes. Wastewater Manager. And I know, Todd, you've been on the show with me as host before, and I know you have been on the show with a past host. So
Yes.
Welcome back. I am so excited about this particular show. I got to admit I was a little ignorant of the fact that I didn't know we even had a municipal judge for the town of Portsmouth, and I really appreciate the opportunity to come watch you in action. So just 2 days ago, I got to drop in on our municipal court proceedings that happened at the town hall, and I loved you guys had to move upstairs, just kind of go with the flow, and it was such a wonderful experience to see how I think reasonable and kind and compassionate I felt like the whole experience was, because it's tricky, right? The people coming in and getting some things they have to deal with, and I was really heartened.
Well,
so maybe we could start with you, Your Honor, and tell us a little bit about, since I didn't even know this existed, what do you know about how this got started, and tell us a little bit about your role.
So the state legislature, authorized the town of Portsmouth in 2013 by state legislation to enact enable a municipal court. Other towns have had municipal courts before that, but now there's enabling legislation that allowed Portsmouth to establish a municipal court. Okay. And so they did, and we started in 2014, and I've been the judge since the inception. Okay. I was here 10 years ago explaining what we might be doing. So the municipal court handles infractions of the town ordinances, and that could be a zoning ordinance, it could be an animal control issue. It could be a noise violation. It could be a building code violation, zoning code violation.
It's a catch-all, but it's not traffic.
No, it's not. We're not doing traffic yet.
Right.
We can. We're authorized to do that, but we're not, which is a whole other story. But the main thing also was that at that time, the town had established a wastewater management ordinance.
Yeah.
And that's why I brought Mr. Drake here today.
Yes.
Because he's been our officer in the court.
He's in the know on the wastewater.
Yeah. So Conley, a lot of the cases we get, probably 80% of what we do is managing the wastewater ordinance.
Really?
Which requires
wow.
people they get a letter from Mr. Drake saying you've got to have your system inspected and pumped out, and if it fails, they have to start the process of replacing that system. And we try to work them through this process. But in effect, if they don't do the inspection, some people just ignore them, the letters, they'll get a citation, and we force them to do the inspection. If it fails, then we force them to build a new septic system. So that's part of it. But I've had other cases of interest,
Yeah. Any favorites? Any crazy?
Well, we've had some interesting animal control cases, and we have a great animal control officer.
Oh yeah.
In Portsmouth, that people probably know who she is, and she does a great job. But we had a case recently where a dog had run out of somebody's house without a leash, and somebody was walking on the street carrying, holding a little, picked up her little dog because the dog was chasing at her.
Goodness.
The little dog, and then the dog jumped up and bit the woman. So
oh goodness.
the dog was not licensed, and she didn't know whether or not there was a rabies vaccine. So we had to go through that. But so she was charged with allowing her dog to run loose, because you really can't have dogs on the loose in the town.
Right.
unless you're in a dog park or somewhere like that.
Right. So that's the
And
kind
all-
of thing.
Yeah, so that was interesting because she contested it, and we had a little trial.
All
And,
right. I hope
we've had-
you'll call me when there's a trial. I
Yeah,
got to
you
just
should.
come see about
I'm
8
glad-
people. It was just 8 people.
we had a
last week.
small docket Wednesday.
Yeah,
We
yeah.
sit on the third Wednesday of the month at 9 a.m. at the town hall chambers usually.
Yeah.
We were upstairs because there's voting in the town hall right now
Right.
going on. So I was pleased to hear that you had a positive experience with the court, because I think that's important, not just for people that are watching, but also for the defendants, I guess you'd call them, the people
Yeah.
that get the summons. Some of them have no idea what they're getting into,
Yeah.
and we want. My philosophy is that, I mean, just the way things should be. When you go to court, you should leave the courtroom with a positive attitude toward our legal system. If
Yeah.
you're not, the system breaks down.
Right.
And that's part of the problem nowadays. There's a lot of
Yes.
dissension. So I want people to walk out of there and say, I had a fair day in court. A judge
Yeah.
listened to me, or whatever. And regardless of the outcome, you need to give people an opportunity to say what they want to say and find out what the whole story is.
Well, if you'll just allow me to share, I was really struck. You were very interested in the context of
Right.
what someone's life was, right? So
Right.
it wasn't there that you were there to be like,
Right.
you're fine. You wanted to
Right.
be like, what's going on with you?
Right.
And there were very reasonable explanations. Like there was someone that it was their father's property, and he was 93, and guess what? He's in a nursing home and didn't get the letter. Shocker, right? And as soon as this gentleman found out about that, he took care of
Right.
business, and you were like, great, all the fines I'm wiping them away, like, because
Right.
you're reasonable.
Right.
Like, that's reasonable.
Well, that's what you should do.
And
But-
there was the lovely woman that was going through a separation, and she was like, so now I'm in charge of the house, and I didn't know I needed this contract signed. And you're like, makes sense to me. And that's what I loved to see. It was so beautiful, quite frankly.
That's the beauty of the municipal court. We're not inundated with 200 cases, and we're not dealing with a whole lot of serious stuff that you have to get to. Not that it isn't serious; everything is serious. But
Yeah.
but what I'm saying is that we have the ability with a municipal court to spend a little more time on these cases if we have to.
Yeah.
And
understand the person.
Yeah, and in the past, these things would go down to the district court, which can be a little imposing because you're in there with people that have committed misdemeanors and more serious offenses.
Yeah, that's kind of the next level
yeah.
up.
Yeah, that's right. So I mean, our municipal court is a town-wide court. So in Rhode Island, there are municipal courts and there are probate courts that are actually town-run and town-wide. They're not part of the state court system.
Okay.
The state court system has a district court, which handles misdemeanors and cases in controversy of less than $10,000 and evictions, and the Superior Court, which handles the more serious crimes like felonies and capital crimes, and also any case or controversy over $10,000, and also can grant injunctions and injunctive relief so it's a more serious court. So we have the district court, the Superior Court, and of course there's a family court which handles family matters, and then the appeals court from there is this Supreme Court. So
Yeah.
the municipal court does have an appeal process. People can take their case to the district court if they're unsatisfied with what we've decided in the municipal court.
Right, so you can make your ruling. Do you ever bump things up yourself? Do you ever say, okay,
No.
hey, we're turning this over to the district court?
No.
So you
No,
make your
that's-
ruling, and then they can
right.
appeal if they want.
That's up to the litigant if they want to take an appeal.
Okay.
If they're unsuccessful.
Okay. Well, I loved after, we did the court and we got to talk, and it was wonderful because you and Todd and Court Chappelle and the crew was there, and we just talked about, like, you're just trying to nudge people. I think that was the word, right? Do you want to expand on that a little bit?
Well,
It's not...
I mean, with the wastewater management ordinance, people are sometimes faced with a daunting prospect of having to replace their septic systems.
Yeah,
Because
lots of money.
The town does not have a sewer system, elected not to do so, and DEM came down on the town and to try to force them to put in some sewerage, especially in areas like Island Park or Common Fence Point that are waterfront.
I live there.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
rather than do that, the town agreed to enact as a settlement of the case that the state actually brought against the town years ago, to actually enact this ordinance and to enforce it. So they're watching us. They're watching what Todd does. They're watching the results of what we're doing. And Todd will tell us a little more about how successful or unsuccessful we've been. But the point is, it can be a daunting prospect for people. There are some people that can't afford to do a new system. So there are mechanisms for people to do loans.
Yeah.
Which I'll let Todd to enumerate.
We'll shift over there. But the whole idea, at least at the municipal level and sending the letters, is just to be like, you need to deal with this.
Right.
It's time to deal with this. There's some fines involved. But again, I witnessed you understand where people were in the process and then back off of some of this.
So if somebody doesn't show up and we default them and let's say they have to replace a cesspool or replace a system, if we default them, we can fine them $100 a day.
Yeah.
Which is what we usually do. And then they get a letter, and then that gets their attention.
Yeah, right.
Because it's a lien on their real estate.
Right.
And then they come forth, and that's when we start working with them. And if they're diligent and they're not stalling and they successfully correct their septic system either with a repair or a new one, we'll pretty much dismiss the $100 a day fine that's been running and maybe work something out with them.
Yeah, and I feel like that's what I witnessed on Wednesday. So that was really.
And that's the end result. We just want people to comply and get things done.
Yeah, and show up and explain where they are in the process.
Yeah, I do get a little upset when people don't show up for court because if and I tell people that you got a certified letter that says you have to go to court. It's a summons, and you just ignore it. Those are important things. You don't ignore court, in my opinion. I don't like when people do that.
Right.
And then they usually some of them have lame excuses and some of them have good excuses, and you listen to them.
Yeah, and you listen to them.
You listen to them.
You listen to them and you try to understand.
Which is fine.
Because it's about trying to do the right thing.
So I must say, what I've heard out there is that this gentleman to my left, Todd Drake, does a wonderful job, and he's with what his role is.
Yeah.
And it's important because he's the main person that people contact when they get that letter.
Yeah.
And they got it, and he'll guide them through the whole process.
Yeah.
It's not simple.
Yeah, right. So Todd, your role, your job exists because of the DEM and what you just explained. So let's pivot over to you a little bit. I know you're in court every time it happens, right? Because, but give us a little context on what your world looks like and how you're trying to help and how you impact this whole ecosystem here.
Yeah, so the position was created by a memorandum of agreement between the state and the town. The parameters for the wastewater manager are spelled out in the ordinance, what I'm supposed to do, when I'm supposed to do it. And mostly it is, it's inspections that need to be done on those septic systems. Different system types have different intervals for inspections. Typically a conventional system is every 5 years. Other systems are every 2 years, and then there are some that are every year, those being the advanced treatment systems.
Depending on the kind of system it is.
Exactly, so it varies, and so I send letters to those individual homeowners when it's time for their inspection to happen, typically about 60 days prior to their actual deadline. It gives them 2 months to hire an inspector, get the inspection done, and report it to the town.
And the inspectors, there's a list of inspectors.
There is.
Right?
So they're all private contractors. They're all certified through coursework at URI. So they have a little piece of paper saying they've passed this course and they are, willing to do these inspections properly. And then they voluntarily are on that list.
Yeah. And it has to be, you have to use somebody on that list.
Yeah, those folks only those folks have access to our online reporting system. So it makes it easier for us if we are sure that all those people have that certification. We also make sure that they've got liability insurance to take care of anything that might happen. And they also have to swear to a code of conduct.
Yeah, you've vetted the vetters, right?
Pretty much.
So, okay. Yeah. All right, that's cool. So I do want to back up, though, I don't want it to be lost on people that the origin of this job that you have, it's not Portsmouth that just wants to have a big bureaucratic system and bother people, right?
Right.
I just want to make sure that people are clear that this is happening because we decided not to do the sewers, right? Because we decided not to do sewers as a town, right? We we had to stop the polluting. So it became, the state was like, then you have to figure out how to regulate this. Is that correct?
That's correct.
I just don't want that to be lost, because as I talk to people about all of this, I mean, there are clearly some people very upset and tears, and because we're talking about big money, and often they can't afford it, and they're mad at they're like, I'm so mad at Portsmouth. I'm so angry. I hate this place. And I just want people to know that this isn't like Portsmouth trying to make a buck or to, this is sort of what we've had to do.
Right.
I just want to make sure I'm right on that.
No,
I don't know that that's
100% on track. The alternative to the sewer municipal treatment plant was everybody gets to keep, septic systems, provided they're up to the current standards of the state. And going forward, anything that is not up to those standards must be replaced. So cesspools, basically. And so the town reached an agreement with the state to have this ordinance and have an inspection schedule and a replacement schedule for all these various system types that aren't up to current standards.
You look like you want to jump in.
No,
or you're just
well,
like, yeah.
no,
that's, he's talking my language.
But the point is, I mean, some people complain about the cost, and and people generally complain about the fact that our government is regulating us too much. There are people out there that say that, right? Yeah. So now you've got a situation where you have a septic system that might cost you $20,000 or $30,000 to put in. But once it's done, there's no annual sewer maintenance fee that you would charge. If we had a sewer system, there'd be an annual fee that would be on your tax bill, like in Middletown. And that could be $1,000 a year. So
that's
or
about
more,
what it is,
or
right?
more, yeah,
or more.
Yeah, you're in Middletown.
So there's a cost to everything. We all are responsible, for our own homes and the environment. And the DEM takes a strong line position on it, and they should, because it's important that we keep our environment clean, especially in a state like Rhode Island where we rely on our waters for recreation and shellfish and other fish. It's.
It seems like every summer there's more and more days that you can't swim, and, right?
It can happen.
So let's go back to those people that feel like they can't afford it. There are some pathways for them. There's some loan programs and...
That's correct.
Yeah,
so the main one that most folks use is service through Rhode Island Housing. It's a 1% service fee that's paid to Rhode Island Housing and the Rhode Island Infrastructure Bank that makes the funds available. So the towns in Rhode Island that have a wastewater management district are eligible to borrow from a larger fund, and then the citizens of those towns can then borrow loans up to, in Portsmouth it's up to $30,000. In other towns it's up to $25,000.
And essentially there's a 1% fee on top of that. Like you could think of like a 1% interest rate.
Right, and that's
but
the
it's
easy
kind of
way
going for the service fee.
That's the easy way to discuss it, but it's truly a service fee.
Yeah, okay.
Because people understand interest rates, so normally people just kind of go to that. So, but let's call it a 1% interest rate, and then you can compare that to what banks are charging these days for, home equity loans, lines of credit, that sort of thing.
That's a great deal.
Very, very affordable on that note, anyway.
Yeah.
So that's something that's available through the Rhode Island Housing office up in Providence.
And you have to basically prove need. So there's where it gets tricky, right?
That one, the main qualifier is a 45% debt to income ratio. So they do run a credit check, they do look at your income and other factors, value of your home, that sort of thing. But the debt to income ratio is the biggest qualifier in that particular instance. There is another program that's serviced by
Church
Community down in Newport, and their interest rate is a little bit higher at 3%, but still much lower than a regular bank. Yeah. That is a more need-based program. They work on a 80% of median income level for a household. So it goes by the town, and it also goes by the number of people that are in the home. And so they have certain levels, and there's caps to that income. If you're below that cap, they can write you a loan.
They can help you.
Right.
Okay.
And the town has also partnered with Church Community on a grant program, which helps homeowners pay for engineering costs, which are typically upfront and out of pocket, because
Yeah,
the
4,000 or
loans
5,000 bucks or so.
could be in that range,
yeah.
sometimes a little bit less. I've heard a few that are even higher than that. Depends on who the engineering firm is. But if they qualify, and again, it's all based on that 80% of median income, they can get all that money paid for by the town.
Yeah, so the engineering piece could be totally covered
Exactly.
by essentially the town of Portsmouth because of this
Exactly.
grant program.
Exactly.
So you just need to talk to you. You
Call
need to.
me,
The
email
theme
me.
is talk to Todd.
Right. And I've actually sent packets of information to all the cesspool owners in town and all the undocumented system owners in the Island Park and Portsmouth Park neighborhoods on 2 separate occasions now, going back to September of 2022.
Yeah.
And the program is open. We need to actually encumber all those funds before the end of 2024.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it goes back into the Rescue Plan Act fund that it came from.
And by encumber, what do you mean?
We have to allocate those funds towards a specific project. So
Okay.
people need to, within the next 9 months, start that process with church community.
Okay, so you're just saying call to
So-
action is like get in touch with me so that we can
call me
allocate these.
quickly. Yeah.
Okay.
To get the process started.
Okay, that's terrific because, let's go back to the people that are like, I can't afford this, Portsmouth's making me do this. Like, you're like, we've got some loan programs in place, some grant programs in place, hopefully what feels like an understanding system, right?
Right.
You're trying to work with them, so please just reach out. I did witness, it sounds like this Rhode Island Infrastructure Bank, there is a giant, there's a number of people applying and there's sort of a backlog. So that's I'm going to call that a big, big challenge.
It is.
Yeah,
and you guys see that.
And it's a challenge in the court because what happens is somebody comes in, they have to replace their system. We want to work with them, but then there are delays. There's a lot of red tape involved in the loan process.
Yeah.
It might take them 2, 3, 4 months to get their loan approved.
Right.
And then after that, they have to hire an engineer to design the system, submit it to DEM, and that gets approved. And then once that's approved, they have to find an installer. And these guys are busy. So finding somebody to actually put the system in, it might be a 2 or 3 month delay also. Especially and we've had a couple of cases on Prudence Island and also Hog Island for that matter.
Yeah.
Which makes it even more difficult for somebody out there.
Oh,
so,
yeah.
And it's going to get even more difficult next year when in 2025, I think, everyone that has a cesspool is mandated to replace that cesspool. And that's statewide. That's state statute. So I don't know. I mean, there aren't enough.
We don't know what's going to happen there.
Engineers and installers out there to really to meet the need. So so that means that we're delaying things, but we work with them. I mean, as long as we know then the defendant isn't delaying the process deliberately or willfully, they're making a good faith effort to move forward and making some progress. The ones that don't make progress, then when it comes time for them finally to get their system approved, we might look at the fine a little bit differently than somebody that complied with the system all along.
Of
So
course.
if they're if they were recalcitrant and they just said, "The heck with you, I'm not doing anything," and we have to put more pressure on them, then when it comes time for us to look at that $100 a day fine, which could be $20,000 by the time they get the system done, or even more.
Yeah.
We'll look at it a little differently. We've had some cases where we've had fines of up to probably $3,000, maybe, believe it or not. And these were against, people that had investment properties maybe, or banks that took over a piece of property. So every case is different, and we look at them that way.
Yeah.
And
that's why you're there.
but for the most part, we want to work with people and get the job done. And the other things that come before me, like building code violations. I mean, sometimes you have somebody that decides that they don't need to get a permit to do work on their house, right?
Right.
They don't need a permit to do a roof or
Right.
something like that.
And
Siding.
you do.
And they get cited by Mr. Kent, our building enforcement officer.
Yeah.
And they come before me.
Right.
So in those cases, usually there's a fine involved. The other miscellaneous cases we've had a couple of noise violations, things like that.
Was it Common
Some
Fence
of them-
Point, the community center? That would be me and
No,
Zumba.
no, it wasn't. But those can be a little acute because sometimes you'll have an industrial use next to a residential neighborhood and they
course.
conflict. And becomes
course.
tricky.
And we're also in a time where neighbors are just, I'm going to call and report them. I just feel like that's happening a lot.
There's not a lot of tolerance out there.
That's the best way to put it.
Not a lot of tolerance.
We're seeing a lot of
I know.
that. Oh my gosh, goodness. Well, my takeaway again is report to court.
Yeah.
Like, just come.
Yep.
Even so, if I'm the widow out there and I'm in my 80s, 90s, and I know I can't pay for this septic system, I at least need to show up and tell you that, and tell Todd that, and explain where I am in the process. And it feels like the town, you guys are going to do whatever you can to support me in getting into compliance to the extent I can.
There are some people that choose to sell their house instead. They might not be using the house. Some of these are summer homes for people that inherited property, like say in Island Park, something like that, that their parents or grandparents may have bought years ago for a retreat from the city, and they're not using it that much, so maybe they decide to sell it, and the new buyer will they buy it with the knowledge that they have to put a new system in, and that's part of the deal. So we have some of those cases as well. A lot of sales, people say, okay, I'm not going to bother with this. I'm going to sell the house, and so those things are of interest too.
Yeah. Well, listen, we've got a couple minutes left, and I want to give you each a moment to just say, I love having guests like you because I can see the passion. I can see like why this is important, and I just would love to give you each a moment to be like, why do you love what you do? And just share that. Either of you can start. I don't.
Well, I mean, I've been practicing law for 53 years now. I came here in 1971 as a legal services lawyer, and I did 5 years of that, and then I went into private practice in 1976. And I don't know how many thousands of people I've represented, but you always feel like you're helping people. As far as the judgeships go, I happen to be on the probate court as a judge in Tiverton, Little Compton, and Block Island, and I just enjoy I enjoy the challenge of that as well as the challenge of the municipal court, because you can have legal issues that come up there, and I enjoy that, and I enjoy interacting with people, and so it all fits together with I think for people that are thinking about a career, I love being a lawyer. I really do. I always did, because the bottom line is you're helping people. And that's what that's what keeps me going anyway.
That's fantastic. Yeah. And Todd, how about you?
I think overall it's a problem-solving position. I enjoy working with people, working through whatever it is that they're experiencing. Yeah. Is it a way to get that inspection done when you can't afford it or you don't have the time, or is it handling an issue with a system that may or may not be in a state of failure? How do we determine, is it truly failed? Do you really need to replace it? An hour and a half ago, I was actually at a property here right across the street from this studio, where the homeowner called me 2 weeks ago and said, my system has failed, how do I start the replacement process? And I said, how do you know it's failed? I said, let's make sure first. Let's not just take somebody's word for it, because I don't have a report that says your system failed. Let's figure it out.
You are so lucky you get to do that every day. So listen, thank you both for coming on the show.
My pleasure, Conley. My pleasure.
What a treat. And call me when the trial happens. Okay?
Absolutely.
Thank you. This has been Portsmouth This Week. We'll see you next time.